I like putting lime juice on a lot of my food, and if I take the lime and I cut it in half and I just want to go eat, I've cooked all this time and it smells good and I'm hungry as fuck, and I squeeze the lime, I get like a tablespoon out of it. If I walk over to the drawer, take the juicer thing out, put it in, and squeeze the whole thing, I get like twice as much out of there. And sometimes it's an actual decision that I make to squeeze the lime, the half of the lime, and throw it in the trash. Every training piece that you do is the lime, and you can decide what you're getting out of it by these little decisions that you make. And if you continuously make that quick decision so you can move on to the next thing, it's not going to work for you. Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. Full Goon Squad in the house.
Chop.
Comp Block 2 is underway. Athletes are in reality right now going through their first week when this podcast posts.
Nice and easy week.
Yes, nice and easy week one. A lot of people asked what our fucking problem was with that ski pistol hang dumbbell snatch, and we like to set the tone. We like that first piece to have just a little extra sass to it. So if you felt like that was the case,
good.
More's coming.
Yeah, that's what we were after. And just as usual, super happy to see people talking about Metcons and talking about what their pace was on the 10-round row bitchwork piece. And we've got the buy-in now. We've had it for a handful of phases and comp blocks, and I think people are really moving the needle out there. And then, as you'll see with some of the questions in this podcast, it's being taken beyond that. You've got the Cooldown Crew, and we've got just these sort of different pieces of the programming that live outside of what we call the old 21-15-9s in the blocks. And the extra things that athletes can do to really move the needle. So it's great to see that. It's great to be moving into another one, coaching our athletes that are prepping for semifinals, whether it's AGOQ, online quarterfinals into semifinals, or the actual athletes that are getting ready for the in-person competition, or the athletes that were super close and we're getting ready for them to simulate what's going on there. It's just an exciting time of year. I think a little bit more so for us because of the weather change. It's a different energy around the gym when you go from like, I've had enough of this shit in February to like, I love this place a month later.
It's like 41 degrees and it's like bay doors are open, bitches. Like
everybody's outside,
So
tarps
nice.
off.
tanning.
Reddening is more of the appropriate
Easy
term.
guy. I gotta get
We,
my
I'm
saying myself.
Okay, I gotta get a base
And-
tan going.
And it reminds me, so my dogs basically during the day follow the sunspots around the house. And then at the gym, I walk out and we have mats, that extra mats that we bought for quarantine when people had to work out outside. And you walk out and there's a member middle of the day, no one else in the gym, and they're laying on that mat. And I'm like, we really are simpler than we make it.
Yeah.
Like, we need some sunshine, we need some warmth, probably need some water, some decent food, sleep, good to go.
We could all.
Sounds
So when you're
like
trying to
I'll
figure
take a
out your
lesson
wellness
from Wilbur.
routine, yeah,
Go.
when you're trying to figure out your wellness routine, head to the Sir Wilbo Baggins Instagram account and you can find out what you should be
All
doing.
the sunspots and the blankets.
Yes, exactly. Anything else for the Q&A?
Oh, I think it's cool that and I think what helps is that all the programs line up better. I think the best that they have than in the past for this time of year, when we have like a lot of folks who, statistically a pretty small number of people are actually moving on to semifinals. But like we said in the podcast last week, the way that like the Hatchet program is structured is that you can pick a week of when you would want to do your semifinal. If you're like somebody who wants to be competitive, and you can actually follow that peaking progression. If you're a teen or a masters, you've got the track to kind of peak you for your quarterfinal, which is still kind of coming up, but none of the pieces are so vastly different from each other that one group of people is kind of on that island. So even if you are a high-level semifinals athlete, you're still get to do the same workouts as the masters, the teens, the hatchet equivalent. So I think that helps a lot as well.
Agreed. All right,
Let's do it.
Q&A time. All right, I'm gonna read this. You're gonna answer it, and then we'll
Do
move
that
around
way? Okay.
in that way. Can I switch bitch work to first piece on non-math days so I can do cardio only in the AM session all the time? And then a second question, is 30-minute maffetone plus warm-up better than no math at all?
So the answer to the first question is, of course, like no reason that you can't move bitch work like on non-math days to do that in the morning. I don't think there's like a whole lot to add about that.
I think
especially it's because the first thing
I'm gonna clarify just real quick. I'm gonna jump in. So we think that all athletes should figure out their own order of the pieces. So if you think you're reading left to right in terms of what order we're suggesting, that is not the case.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
No issues with that. No issues with that. And then is 30-minute math plus warm up better than no math at all? Yes, definitely. If you're choosing one or the other, do it. I'm assuming that means like, hey, my 15-minute warm up and then a 30-minute math session. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the only thing to add to that is if you're going to do some strength training. I know it says cardio only, but there might be some days where you think about getting some weightlifting in that we try to separate those sessions by about 3 hours, so you're not having any sort of interference between the cardio development and like your strength gains that are occurring. So
that is partially true. That is only if you are lifting first.
Yeah, okay.
You can lift and get the same sort of hypertrophy effect after you do conditioning. But if you do a session where you're trying to like pack on muscle and then go do conditioning, the research shows that you have a tough time. The other reason I brought that up is because a few people have asked in this one about putting on size, which is not the same thing as strength.
Right.
All right. At Zachary M asks, thoughts about MAF on both active rest days, Thursday and Sunday?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that being an occasional habit. My one concern here is the athlete burning out because they don't ever get out of the gym for any single day. The psychological stress that training has on your body, if you're constantly double downing on that and doing that every single week without any time off the gym, you might start to find that you can't give a shit or push as hard on your other active or your normal training days. So again, I don't think it's a bad thing to consider. But if MAF's a really big area of weakness for you, what I would say is potentially pull out some other pieces and try to inject MAF on one of those 5 training days so you're not getting no actual full rest days because, again, burning out is a real thing.
I have Austin, especially during semifinals prep, doing both days. And I will allow an athlete to do the 7-day-a-week thing if we have identified them as someone who responds well to low volume. So I personally do better when I train, which an active rest day for me is a MAF, 7 days a week. But I don't respond well to high volume, so my volume on other days is very reasonable. Just had the episode with Paige. Paige could be the type of person where if we know we're going to dial her back and she's going to be doing less work than all other athletes at her level, a math session on both of those isn't too bad. Asterisk would be you shouldn't run on both.
Yeah, it'd be tough on the legs. All right, at G Cryer. At this point, many of us are beginning to look ahead to the next season. If we are going to start utilizing the weakness templates, is it best to focus on one at a time while still keeping GPP high? I think there's more to that question, but I think that's the gist of it. Ted can confirm.
All right. So I'm a very firm believer in if you're trying to bias a program that you do it one thing at a time, even if you shift that thing more often than you normally would. So what I mean by that is, let's say you add a weakness template or you just do, the climb the ladder with skill work or something like that, and you do see the progress you want in 2, 3, 4 weeks, you can turn that over and start a new thing afterwards. Whereas a weakness template typically is somewhere in the 5 to 7 week range. But yes, I think the overarching theme of this question is like, should I focus on a bunch of these things or should I focus on one with GPP still being the idea? And I think you've hit the nail on the head just in terms of like, stay the course, do what you're supposed to be doing, and bias your program instead of overcorrecting and doing too much of the same thing.
Yeah, I think if you're going to follow a weakness template, just remember that replaces something in your training day, is not added on to it. And with this phase, specifically the comp block 2, especially in the coming weeks, there are going to be a lot of pieces to choose from, such that point. you can really kind of almost create your own weakness template just by looking at the number of pieces per day, obviously picking the correct number that's appropriate for you, but the odds that you're going to see something that you want to work on at least once a week is very high.
Yeah. Am I supposed to be reading this?
I think so.
Why don't we overhead squat in strength sessions? I've heard in previous podcasts that we don't, but not really the why.
Well, this is not entirely true. You're not going to find it in the lift 1 column all that often. Overhead squatting is much more a skill and a function of your personal mobility than it is strength. So it's kind of the same idea with the front squat. We don't have a lot of front squat specific like programs. We've got plenty of opportunities to do high rep stuff in workout, like the in-WOD lift will be the front squat because that's a little bit more sport specific. But as far as developing strength goes, we're going to, the standard kind of pressing series, squatting series is going to get you that strength. We snatch basically year round. So there isn't, it gets mixed into Metcons. If what you're asking is like, why isn't a lifting progression? It's because the overhead squat is much more of a skill lift. If it's something that you struggle with, I would urge you to kind of take a look at why that is the case, because if it's a strength thing, well, you don't necessarily need to be overhead squatting to develop squatting strength, because you can back squat more than you can overhead squat. If it's an overhead stability thing, like that's again a little bit more of maybe an accessory work type thing where you're holding empty barbells overhead, dumbbells overhead, handstand holds, kind of creating shoulder stability. But if it's something that you don't like, I'd be more than willing to bet it is a mobility limitation that you need to work on. And when you can unlock those positions, you're going to find the movement to be a hell of a lot easier, and you just get stronger with the, squat press combination.
Yeah, this is a timely question because of what just happened, but also the answer is timely. There is heavy overhead squatting in comp block 2 and comp block 3. Yep. Those are the times of year when we do more front squatting and overhead squatting. So potentially if you're newer to the program, just within the last, couple of phases, you might think that we don't do that. And it is not a reaction. We don't react in that way to what happened in quarterfinals. Both of those comp blocks were written prior to us knowing what those quarterfinals workouts were. And the athletes who sort of take our advice in terms of the mobility and the positioning and all that stuff in the last 2 years have thanked us for how well their front squat went in quarterfinals last year, and then how well the overhead squat went here. So, there is obviously the layer of, if we're remote coaching somebody and they suck at this, we're going to have them do it. Yeah. Like, it's not like it's that sort of thing. So there is a bit of an onus on an athlete to say, I've identified this issue during the comp blocks when we do the weirder stuff, the heavy overhead squat, the pegboard, the strict muscle up, the vested stuff, whatever. Like, you do need to find times throughout the year to sprinkle that back in. So it's not just like twice a year you go, oh yeah, I suck at this. But I would say that's really kind of the only nuance to that.
Yeah, variance is important, but we're chasing stimuli, not individual movements. And I think that's kind of what you were summarizing there with your holds and your squats and your presses, is that, we train stimuli, not specific movements, so that they carry over to specific movements.
There's also like 10 trillion squat snatches done a year, but we'll just leave that.
How many?
All right. At Ryan Bretag asks, how might we break down / debrief a training piece performance in order to extract lessons, nuggets, and data for growth, as well as future use when it matters?
Let's do a whole podcast. Ted, cancel the rest of the questions.
This is the entire podcast.
Excellent question. Love this question.
I mean, the Athlete IQ podcast is a really good lens to look through when it comes time to, break this down. But essentially, this goes to many articles and topics we've talked about in the past where, like, if you don't have a reason for why you are doing said piece, then you probably shouldn't do said piece. And sometimes that's very obvious. You do the quarterfinals and you're clearly terrible at overhead squats, and this is an overhead squatting Metcon. Really easy to make that kind of connection there. Whereas other things might not be as obvious. But essentially, what I would like to see an athlete do if they are, following the complete tier and they're seeing their whole week in advance is kind of highlighting the things that matter most to them, and then being able to answer the question very specifically, why am I doing that? And then once that happens, you're breaking things down like, how did I transition from movement to movement if it were a cardio piece? Or what were my reps and sets like if it was a muscular overload? Or how hard could I go on the rower before I felt like I was redlining? These are type of things that, aren't necessarily a complete checklist of things to check off, but that's the kind of information you want to be gathering when you do this. So honestly, Caroline just walked into the office a few minutes ago and asked specifically about one of the Comp Block 2 pieces. And you look at that workout, we instantly thought of 4 or 5 different ways you could attack that workout and what you could glean from a different attack strategies. And I think you described it best as a hypothesis. Like, you are guessing what you think is going to happen. You do said movement or workout, and then you analyze it and said, did my hypothesis ring true, or was I completely the opposite of what I thought I was going to do? So I wish I could give you a very specific, like, 1-sentence answer, but
I'm going to break the rules and talk for way too long. Cool. I'm not supposed to.
I was going to talk for way too long.
You can go next.
Nice.
You can go next.
You're up.
I said cancel the rest of the questions, didn't I? So all of my semifinals athletes, to wrap their minds around what my expectations are, because as remote coaches, and we started another couple of businesses every week,
why not?
Things get a little busy. You don't always see your athlete do every single training piece. So all of my semifinals athletes are sharing a training journal with me every single week, and every lift, every skill, every Metcon, every interval, every bitch work piece, they are stating, how did they warm up? How did they cool down? What are they trying to get out of this piece? What information did they glean from it? Score, what went well, all that stuff. And Caroline came over, like Sherb said, today, and the C2 bike, chest to bar pull-up, touch and go power snatch piece from this week, she asked sort of what should my focus be on this. And like Sherb said, we came up with so many different ways you could take it, right? Like, you look at the piece and you ask yourself, like, where do I want to be better? Like, I know, like, for her, she's very good with the barbell. She's very good at the barbell gymnastics. And being her size, you got to work your ass off to get pretty good on those C2 machines. So she today is trying to find out what happens if she comes out the gate, because it's an interval, and then tries to do the chest bar pull up and the touch and go. That's her information. But let's say she either kind of liked all 3 movements or didn't have a strong opinion of it. It could be like, I want round 1 and round 3 to feel the same. How do I have to move in round 1, 2, and 3 to have the same output in round 3? So it's a ton of different directions that you can take this. But basically, when you're guessing what your paces are going to be on a machine, when you're guessing what your sets are going to be, you write that information down, and then you say what happened afterwards. And then maybe even in a third place, you have a book that says 20-minute AMRAP with a decent amount of skiing in it, I can hold 1,000 calories per hour. That is information that is insanely important, because you know where you can move the needle, and then especially if it comes up in competition, what you need to ask of yourself so you don't get trapped up in somebody else's strategy.
Yeah, I'll attack this from 2 kind of angles here. One is the I guess it says training piece, so it doesn't specify what type of training piece. The easiest place to start on this, I would say, is your bitch work pieces, especially on the machines where you have objective feedback right in front of you. You can revisit a C2 monitor. You can write down, splits or wattages and RPMs or whatever metric you use on things like the assault bike. And especially when it's like it was a piece a couple days ago. It was like 90 seconds on, 1 minute off of rowing, like 10 rounds. That is a shitload of information that you should be able to use. That's a pretty applicable sort of metric where it's like 90 seconds of work, not a whole ton of rest, that you should be able to say, oh, it turns out I can hold X pace for 90 seconds, rest, not, well under 1-to-1 and then reattack it. And that should be able to translate, or at least give you an idea of where to go over like into a Metcon. If that rough duration of rowing or biking or whatever it happens to be pops up in a Metcon, you should be able to refer back to some sort of data or have in your head like, oh, I have a rough idea of how this is going to go. When it comes to Metcons, you both kind of addressed it, but the way that you debrief and break down afterward is predicated on the idea that you establish some sort of goals and had ideas going into the piece. So you can't have, your debrief is not going to be nearly as effective if you just do the workout and then think about it after. You need to think about it before, give yourself some, whether it's like individual goals, or even if it's just as simple as like, this is how long I think this round is going to take, or each section is going to take, and then debrief after. But you have to have something to kind of compare it to as far as like what you expected versus what happened, that sort of thing. If it's just like, oh, I wish I did better. It's like, well, better than what? What do you like? You have to have some sort of benchmark to compare against. So a good debrief starts with kind of like a starting point of like, how do I want this to go, or thinking about it before executing.
True.
Tom versus Tom. How do you want us prioritizing when math days intersect with regular training volume and I just can't get it all done? What's going to get me the most of my time, get me the most out of my time? And I actually saw this question on... Oh, sorry. Jumping in. Sorry, go ahead.
Goodness.
Jumping ahead. Go ahead.
You can steal a math question from me?
Yeah, sorry.
Goodness.
Got excited.
God, he doesn't have a whole lot going, you know? You gotta give him his math stuff.
This is the only thing that I do that you guys do, okay?
Fuck.
All right. So what's important here is again, zoom out and look at the entire day. And the math, a math is a skill piece, is a strength piece, is a Metcon. Don't think of it as a supplemental accessory to the program. So if you're looking at a day for total volume, obviously this takes up by far the most amount of time of any piece, but you are choosing what makes the most sense for you to get better within these windows, whether it is a day at a time or a week at a time. And you're just asking yourself, like, do I need, like basically everybody in the entire community, to have a more robust aerobic energy system? Do I need better supporting musculature so I don't get injured? And I could just go on campaigning for this, but don't think about it in that way. Like that, I think is a way for people to sort of tack it on as extra volume, and it's in line with stuff for a specific reason. Most of the year, we are going to tell you when it's mandatory, and if it is that time of year, then you just make sure you get that done. And if it's choose 0 to 3, some days you got to choose 0. But I mean, it's fairly straightforward in that it is important enough that we think it should be in line with your programming. And when you're choosing your pieces, that's all about you trying to stay objective. So.
Yeah, the only layer I'd add to this, based on the fact that you said you're like a busy dad, and like I think coaching was another thing on the docket here, is that you're probably going to respond better to a really effective math session than trying to squeeze math, a lift, and an accessory thing all of into like a 90-minute window. Like this is another great example of why intensity matters more so than volume. If this is going to move the needle for you the most, just do that, do it really, really well, and be okay with that. Because again, you don't need to add layers of stress into your life being like, I didn't do these 17 things. I already got one really good thing done. You should check that box and get ready to do the next thing the following day.
Also, when you're thinking about it in the context of the entire week, 1 or 2 maffetone sessions compared to what will probably be in the neighborhood of like 5 to 12 Metcons,
right.
Like typical Metcons. Like it's okay to sacrifice maybe that's the only conditioning you do that day because of your time constraints. Like that's still a useful training session. You're going to get your CrossFit Metcons in on the other days.
I mean, you and I do that quite often where it's just like life presents the opportunity to do, one 45-minute session. So I'll go out to the, outside, grab the C2 bike and do that for 45 minutes. And that's fitness for a day.
Training for the day.
That's a good use of time as well.
What's the biggest, ask me, at Blue Spartan, what's the biggest adjustment, if any, the athletes make in the days prior to and on game day for a live competition instead of an online competition?
Ooh, live competition. So I actually created a checklist for a couple of my athletes when we were going to Wadapalooza. For some of them, it was their first like big kind of like out of town competition. For others, they've done it before, but the checklist helped. You have to kind of consider the fact that a live competition presents a lot of kind of external variables as far as things like we're now in a different location, we're sleeping in a different place, the route that you use to get to the gym that you do every single day that's basically on autopilot is no longer there for you. So there's all these like really small things that you don't necessarily think about that contribute to stress. So one of the things that I have or suggest that athletes do is like, obviously there's kind of the check-in time, but use that as an opportunity to familiarize yourself with the surround, like kind of the area, kind of make it feel more like you know where you are, like kind of almost make it feel like home as much as you can within the short period that you have. So getting to the venue, kind of walking around it a little bit if you can, take a look at the competition floor, get a feel for how things might be laid out, because all those things kind of contribute to execution on game day. As far as the training stuff goes, we generally, the same stuff that you wrote in your article, Sherb, on the primer day and like the day leading up to the MetCon, all of those things stay pretty much the same. The only differences that I would say is that, and I would also apply this to like when we are in person with our athletes at that event, the day before on that primer day, we might adjust the primer a little bit to maybe an athlete wants to like touch on a couple of the movements, like the Wadapalooza this year, we had that double kettlebell box step over. It was kind of a weird movement. So either on like the flush day or on the primer day, we get a little bit of those reps in just to kind of like what I basically tell was one of my athletes is like a confidence EMOM or something like that, where there's movements that are just like, I'm a little bit stressed. And as the coach, I know that like, you're going to be fine. You'll be able to do it. But for the athlete, it's like, yeah, let's get a couple of these in to make sure that the confidence is there going into game day. And then, again, coaches, we might adjust a little bit of the primer. Maybe the lift is something that's a little bit more specific to a lift that we know is going to be at the competition. The event's already been announced and it's this weird complex or something. We get a mini version of that as the primer lift as opposed to the, one power snatch every minute for 10 minutes. So it's just minor tweaks and modifications, but overall it's fairly similar as far as the kind of what you outlined and what we tell people to do in that week leading up to competition. There's just the added layer of you as the athlete getting familiar with the venue, kind of use the day or two before to make sure that you have enough food for the entire weekend. You've got water. You don't need to worry about running out to Whole Foods between events to come back and like kind of adding that sort of stress, basically trying to plan as much as you can to so that you can just focus on the event rather than the logistics.
If you want to create that checklist for yourself, you basically write down a day in the life of what you do at home. And I'm talking every single thing that you do. So you wake up and then you make your coffee. Okay, so how are you going to make your coffee when you're on the road? But you go through every single thing. You pack your stuff up, you get to the gym, you walk in and you go grab your Oli shoes. You take every single thing you do in an entire day and you draw an arrow from your normal day to travel day and unpack it. Be very thorough with it. When this happens, what is actually taking place? Like if I was going to go train at somebody else's gym, if I was going to go join someone for a training session, all of these variables change, and that gets blown up even more when you travel. So day in the life of me, this is what I want to happen when I train. draw an arrow and unpack the shit out of every line item, and you'll really start to see what should change and what you should think about. Because a lot of that stuff, you go, like you said, you go on autopilot, and then it doesn't go so well when you're traveling.
All right. At Vic Rod asks, what is the first most memorable moment that you had that made you think and gave you the gut feeling of, yeah, I want to do this for as long as I breathe? Are you sure?
Yeah, good luck. I don't think I'm going to go the CrossFit like sport realm of this, more of the like affiliate style, which again translates a ton to what we do day in and day out. But, you know, I think the first person that I think was at CrossFit Lewisburg that had gone from, I don't know, 300 pounds down to like 225 and like just was able to have a much more, I don't know, fruitful life because less things were kind of holding them back, was really the thing that kind of got me into this and got me hooked and like, man, like we can actually change people's lives. And while that might not be the case for every single person that follows Misfit Athletics, the like weight loss goal, the helping people achieve things like having, you know, Josh Maxwell come to camp and be able to get his first 250 pound clean and jerk and then like get him close to ring muscle ups and watch him link bar muscle ups together. And this is a guy that was, you know, severely overweight. And he would tell you, you know, one of the things that he's most proud of is he found a community of people that helped encourage him to want to keep doing this. So for me, I don't know if I can put it on one single thing, but it's the ability to change other people's lives and kind of having a job that feels like it has a real purpose to it, as opposed to like, all right, they paid me this many dollars this month and that goes into this budget and that budget. Like there's more to it than just the financial ability. It's the feeling that you get when you help someone succeed is really the reason why I decided to stick with this as a career.
So Misfit Athletics specifically the blog started in 2012, and I didn't quit my full-time job until 2016. And that was a pretty big thing for me. It was the type of thing where I wasn't going to be able to move the needle on how much money the company made until I quit. So you're basically gambling with your future, in terms of doing that and making that leap. And I remember, one of the first training camps that we did after that, was one of the Iceland ones, and being in Iceland, being in this, you know, beautiful place was so different with my friends, also coaching at the same time. I had one of my very first, like, this is my job moments. And it was like, okay, this is awesome. Like this type of stuff is what makes grinding through all of these other things worth it. Like I think the corollary to an athlete is I think a lot of people always worry so much about the destination. And there's some proverb that like, the only thing behind mountains are more mountains. So the idea that you go through life and don't realize that what you're doing in the moment is the thing you should be grateful for and paying attention to, as opposed to like getting to the very end of your story and hoping that you liked the end of it. So when I'm working, I use moments like that to tell myself that the day-to-day is the thing. There is no end goal. Like you can continue to set goals, but behind that mountain is another mountain. So it's really about like continuing to enjoy the community next door, enjoy working with my coworkers, taking on new projects, doing all these different things. And when that all started for me was definitely in Iceland, when it's like, all right, I can do this. We can do this.
Yeah, I think just for me, I don't think there was like a one specific like light bulb moment. It was more an assessment of my own kind of personal values as far as what I needed to do. You know, for some people, it's like the financial motive is like, you know, oh, well, it's a job is like a means to an end, and that's fine. It's like, I want to make six figures. I want to make $500,000 a year. That's my motivation. Whatever job I do to do that is like, whatever. Some people, it's like, yep, I don't really care what I do. I'm going to provide for a family. Other people, for me, at least right now, it's like I need to be able to go to work, do something that is both fulfilling to me, that this will sound kind of bad, that I don't hate. Not to say that like this job is just one tier above something that I don't hate, because that's obviously that's obviously not true. But it's more of a kind of personal. I need to be doing something that is both fulfilling, that I can see kind of like there's a direct correlation between how hard I work and how well the company does, and that's partially a function of just the size of the company, it being small. That, like, you know, if you're in a company of 500 people and you do something really good, then that might not move the needle very much. But when you have the opportunity to work hard and then see kind of the fruits of your labor, that's important to me. I personally like being able to see tangible progress in something, and that kind of keeps me motivated. So, this sort of thing. And I've always just enjoyed teaching other people in some capacity. So coaching, teaching, educating, those sorts of things all kind of fall in line to me. So that's my spiel on that.
All right. From Jay Brush, are there any tips or tricks to mentally push yourself into the dark cave in WODs? I find I can push to a point, but when I hit the wall, I struggle to run through it.
I'm glad that this one ended up with me, because I didn't read all of the questions prior to the podcast, but this one I saw and it really stuck out. I have two answers, and they're sort of very different from each other, but should hopefully go together for you when you're trying to make this change. Number one, people work out very regularly outside of the right strategy for their capacity, and wonder why, when they hit a true breaking point, why they can't keep going, because they're comparing themselves one-to-one to another athlete who's on a different level, different strengths and weaknesses. You could be on the same level or you could be on the same level on a leaderboard, but not knowing this person can do 1,000 chest bar pull-ups and this one holds a 130 pace on a C2 machine all day. Those are just two totally different people. So what we see is an athlete trying to keep up with the wrong person at the wrong time within a workout, and then they think, because that person kept going, not that that's that person's wheelhouse or that they've put in work that you haven't, however you want to view it, that's the comparison there, and I'm weak, or I don't have sort of that place to go. Hunter is very good at sort of getting out of most workouts what he should. And when you ask him if there's some sort of mental thing about that, he usually sort of chuckles. And I think he believes and also knows to a certain extent that being a strategist, like a pragmatic strategist, helps a lot. And then when you get used to that and you're put in those situations over and over, and digging deep is just like one layer more than where you're at versus like 50, that you can allow yourself to go there. Like, and I saw it very specifically in the deadlift burpee workout during the open. You hit a wall, and because you didn't hit the wall at 10,000 miles an hour and blow yourself up and die, you hit a wall where you were flirting with your threshold.
Yep.
You were like, I can find a way to fall on the ground right now.
Yeah.
Like, dude's doing step back burpees and shit, like that kind of thing. But he kept moving versus someone who doesn't understand how they ended up there, because they don't have any color left in their fingers and there's still a couple of minutes left in the workout.
Asking.
So you have to
no color left, round to 9 on the way up.
Continually adjust. Of course, as you get fitter, as you develop a capacity, whatever, you need to upgrade these ways of thinking. And then my other answer, which is completely different, but again, I hope helps, is you put yourself in scenarios where you do find out what you're made out of with lower stakes. If I go next door and try to do a bitch work piece with you guys, Caroline, Austin, and it's one of the ones where there's, 4 or 5 minute sections and the rest is not excellent for whatever reason. It could be long, so it's not excellent that I feel like I can push hard, whatever. There's a million different reasons why. But then I go over there and I'm in class and you guys programmed minute on, minute off on the rower for a period of time. And every round, it's like 20, 30 seconds left when I really started to hurt and I knew better than I have to slow down. I got 15 pulls left. Are you kidding me? And these are these moments where you can prove to yourself that you are tougher And that's when you set a baseline for when you can reach a little bit more. At no point during that did I say, okay, I want to hold a 145 in this, so I'm at a 130 at the beginning. I don't ram myself into that wall. I flirt with my threshold, and then I ask myself to hold it for 15 more seconds to prove it. And I was talking with Hunter after we did that workout about the way that I programmed for a lot of athletes, like when we were starting out with remote coaching, like, again, trying to figure out that like being able to pay the mortgage. You've taken every damn client that comes through the doors you're working with, a CrossFit Games athlete and a beginner at the exact same time. And for someone who wasn't willing to go there and to push, I take the exact same volume of a bitch work piece that I know is going to fuck them over mentally, and I chop it up into a ton of pieces. They get the same amount of working time at that pace. They get the same amount of rest time, just divided out. And then we're proving it to them. And this time it was 30-second windows, and the next time it's 45-second windows and a minute windows. So I think those two ideas brought together over the course of an entire comp block could bring somebody to a much better place mentally, realistically looking at where they're at. If you hit that wall too hard, what are you going to expect from yourself? And this is the kind of thing where you could typically notice it in other athletes more than yourself. It's hard to know those things about yourself.
I'll just add one quick thing. Sorry, I know we got a zillion questions, but you have to, if you're always running into that wall, you got to ask yourself why you're doing that. Is it a bad strategy thing? Is it you're racing next to somebody you don't have any business racing, or like you said, it's just like different workout, different strategy, different athlete, that sort of thing. But the finding you can incrementally get closer to that wall. Like what's painful now, like, okay, like pull it back like a notch or two. And then the next time you do it, it's a little bit harder. And then you get your days where you do have to run yourself into the wall with the bike sprint sort of thing. But incrementally get yourself closer to that wall and maybe then pull back, that sort of thing. And the, repeated efforts on a machine is a great way to do that, where it's like, I know I can do this for this long. And maybe it's as simple as like an EMOM type progression where it's like, I'm going to hold literally 1 or 2 more seconds at this pace longer next week than I did. It's not as complicated as you need it to be, or as you might be making it out to be.
It reminds me of the weakness warm-ups way back in the day. If someone was very bad at rowing, you had them row a 2K, and the idea was you'd go kind of steady through 3/4 of it, and then the last quarter you make a decision. And early on, maybe it's less than a quarter. Maybe it's the last 50 meters, and the next week it's 100 meters, then 150. But like iterating through linear progression, I think is one of the most effective ways to teach yourself to go there when you don't want to start.
Yep.
All right, Misfits, just a quick break in the show to shout out the show sponsors. We are brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. You can head to sharpentheaxeco.com, use the code word Kiala to save 10% on your order, and obviously donate 10% to an awesome foundation. You goons cleaned us out from spring cleaning, but you need to be on the lookout for the semifinals collection. It is coming in hot. And it is some really fucking cool artwork and design. So that's all I'll tease on that for now, because it's going to be good.
You don't want to burn it down.
Head to sharpentheaxeco.com. Use the code word Kiala, Keala, to save.
We're also brought to you by Proper Fuel. You can head to properfuel.co. Use the code word Misfit to save 10% on any order. Common question we get over at Proper Fuel is, what makes your product different from all of the others? And the biggest difference is there's no hype built around our our product, specifically because there's every ingredient that's in there is backed by science at the amount that it's going to actually move the needle, as opposed to like, cool, you have 1/100th of a gram of creatine in there. Let's charge $900 for it. So again, unlike our competitors, every ingredient in both the pre and the recovery is backed by science at the amount you need to move the needle. You can head to, again, properfuel.co, use the code word Misfit to save 10%.
And last but not least, we are brought to you by ourselves. The best way to support this podcast, to support all of the media that you see on YouTube and Instagram, is to head to misfitathletics.com or the SugarWOD marketplace. Comp Block 2 is underway. You can get 2 weeks for free to see if it is working for you. Baseline testing at Team Misfit is also underway. If you are an affiliate owner, make sure you get in there and get your free sample or your 2 weeks for free is it 2 weeks for free?
On SugarWOD.
On SugarWOD. Make sure you go in there and check that out. Really get an idea of what the programming is like. If you are not an affiliate owner but want to be able to follow along, be part of the community, tell the affiliate owner to head to teammisfit.com or the SugarWOD marketplace. All right, back to the show. Am I reading this?
So,
at Ryan Breetag with the 2 best questions of the day. What are 1 to 2 books the Goon Squad, I, and top Misfit athletes would recommend we read and apply to build the Misfit mental frameworks?
Oh, I didn't read the Misfit mental frameworks part, so I'm going to ignore it. I'll the question. Yeah, I'm going to do whatever I want.
Here are the books I like.
No, I did see this, and I was thinking about it, and I'll go in a direction that I know neither of you two are going to.
Try me.
I don't know if
Calvin and Hobbes.
Hey.
The one I've got one book, and that is Lone Survivor, the Marcus Luttrell, the story with Marcus Luttrell, the Navy SEAL. It's the story that brought you the workout Murph. So like the history behind how Lieutenant Michael Murphy was killed in action. The book Lone Survivor is by Marcus Luttrell. He was the one single survivor from that SEAL team who made it, and he wrote the book with the intention of kind of making sure that that team's story was told. Not just like it wasn't a here's how tough I am sort of thing. But if you want a glimpse into like someone just like the mental fortitude that was required to survive the situation that he did, even if you've seen the movie, I would strongly the book is substantially better.
Correct.
And just like when you crawl like 8 miles through the mountains of Afghanistan with like a broken back and like a broken femur because you just rolled down like a 400-meter high spike pit mountain in Afghanistan and watched an entire team get killed. Makes some bitch work pieces not seem so bad. So
human beings are capable of some pretty incredible things, and that context waters down the old CrossFit just a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a really good book just from like holy shit, what are humans actually capable of enduring, and why am I upset about this 4x5 minute Metcon?
Yep. And the movie is if you do read the book, watch the movie again afterwards, and it's better with more background. You understand how like the intricacies of their character and just different stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Say the first, it's 2 books, honestly, but then I have a 3rd book, so I'm going to break the rules and go 3 books. But the first 2 are both by Ryan Holiday that you suggested I read years ago. And those 2 books are Ego is the Enemy and The Obstacle is the Way. I think both of those books have great examples of why, when we go through our training, we're going to have lots of things that feel like they can derail us. If you give them the power to, and you quickly realize that you hold that power. So, by reading the stories, which Ryan Holiday typically throws out an idea and then gives you an example through history, like someone else has experienced this thing and how they kind of worked their way through it. And that was a really powerful book for me because, again, it's very easy to get lost in the comparison game. Like you were saying a second ago, where, though they beat me we're at the same place on the leaderboard, but you don't know if that's a wheelhouse for them and, terrible for you. And that's why there's a big discrepancy in your score for one single day. And then the Ego's the Enemy is just another one where, if you get wrapped up too tightly in that competitor mindset to the fact that you don't focus on improving, just like beating the people left and right, that can really derail you in your fitness and kind of basically blind you to the things that you actually should be doing versus just like my name was ahead of this person's name today on this leaderboard. And then the other one I was going to throw out there is Relentless by Tim Grover. I listened to that book.
What was the book name?
Relentless by Tim Grover.
Say it
kind of
as fast as you can.
The
But
Michael
it's actually
Jordan one?
Yes. Yeah, he was Michael Jordan's trainer, but he wrote a book upon just like the mentality that Michael Jordan had in order to be what he was. And, you know, if you've watched The Last Dance, you might realize you might not want to have every single trait that Michael Jordan has, but there are a lot of things that he did that helped make him the person that he is. So I'd say those kind of the 3 books that I would put near the top of the shelf when it comes time to develop the like athlete mindset you need to be able to be the best you can.
You don't want to play pickup ball with him now because you know he heard that comment. He had someone report it back to him and he took it personally.
He's gonna fight me.
Yeah, so I tried to think about this from the standpoint of books that not only do I think put people in the right headspace, but ones that I've also like actually recommended to people, because there's if you're not, the more you read, the better reading is, the easier it is to read, the more you can dig into certain things. It's very much like exercise. Like if you stop reading for a chunk of time, you go back to reading and like that, you read like the first paragraph 46 times sort of a thing. But if you read, like I typically read twice a day. And when I actually do what I do that, I'm much more comfortable reading stuff that's a bit more complicated or whatever. You just something about training your brain with that. So the three books that I recommend the most to athletes specifically are The Obstacle is the Way, Man's Search for Meaning, and don't say this backwards, The War of Art, not The Art of War. 2 different books. Both very good books.
I got one of those 3.
And if you need, I'll throw this out there. If you need a narrative, if you're not a nonfiction person, I typically recommend Siddhartha or The Alchemist. There's something about they both take a very important journey, and I think it explains the concepts behind not searching for that destination. What's interesting about both stories and both books is the journey that they're on and all these crazy places that they end up and how their life changes over different periods of time. And sort of what gets them there. So I'd say if you're trying to wrap your mind around being interested in the journey versus the destination, those would help. The War of Art is a book that I think Ted will know what I'm talking about. If I went back and read it now, I think I'd have different context. I wasn't that much of an artist at the time, the first time that I read it. It very much applied more to work and training than anything else. So I think it'd be really interesting to go back and read it now. So I think I would see it through a completely different lens. But it's this idea of what he calls the resistance. And it's really fascinating. And if you read it through the eyes of your job or being an athlete, it's a really, really fascinating book. And it's also the kind of book that has common themes throughout that you could pop in and out of and be over here, then be over there. It's not like a story arc kind of a situation, which is nice. And I want to end with Man's Search for Meaning. I've talked about this before. I do not think I would be in this room doing this podcast right now if I hadn't read that book. That book is like reading that book was one of the most important like moments of my whole life. And I know that sounds crazy. And the funny thing is the concept in it is really simple. And it's hard for me to tell people what it meant to me because it's so fucking simple, but like blew the back of my skull off, completely off of my head. Like absolutely crazy. So I don't want to tell someone what it means to me. Go read it. I promise you it's worth it. It's going to blow your mind for one reason or another. And maybe we'll finally at some point start that Misfit book club and all the nerds can get together on a Discord channel and talk about books.
My turn to read?
Yeah, I think so.
At J Brush asks, after peaking for your respective comp, is there any benefit to pulling back on weight/volume/intensity to recover, reflect, and refocus?
Yes, period. Next question. No, yes, actually, it's really important that you take the time to do this post-competition for nothing more the physical toll and the mental toll that peaking for something takes on your body. You know, you spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to maybe 10 weeks for Comp Block 2, getting yourself to be the best version of yourself when it comes to fitness. And if you try to jump immediately back into programming, let's say you take one day off and Tuesday you're like itching to get back into the gym, I promise you aren't going to be anywhere near the 100% that you need to be able to get all that you can from training. And I know there lives that like athlete anxiety. Like, I haven't worked out for 26 minutes. I better go do a 21:15:9 really quickly. But you need to decompress from these things. And often that when athletes can convince themselves to do that, maybe, take care of the things they've been putting off for the last 6 weeks, or get outside the gym and, take the dogs for a walk, or go hiking or surfing, or just something that isn't just doing, again, thrusters and pull-ups inside the box of a gym. You can start to rediscover, like, what about the season went really, really well? What things do you need to work on? And how can you set a plan moving forward, as opposed to just being completely overstimulated because you haven't taken that time? So, for example, the two of my athletes that are trying to compete for semifinals missed it by just a little bit. And, that first thing they asked me after Sunday was like, what am I doing on Monday? And I said, jack shit, get out of the gym, take a week off. And during this week, I'm not saying you can't exercise. It's not what I'm saying. You're just not going to train with a specific focus in mind. The idea here is, if you like to go exercise, go ahead and go do that, but don't put any sort of pressure on yourself for scores or weights or anything. Take time to just basically chill out, because your body needs that time to reset ahead of the, potential next season that's coming for you.
I tell athletes not to, because I just had this conversation off the high of quarterfinals. What do I do right now? And these are athletes that are going to be prepping now for semifinals. Don't drive yourself crazy in either direction. So do not start training again, because it's not going to go well. And then don't keep yourself outside of what makes your life normal, because that's also going to drive you nuts. Really, the only like hard and fast rule is you are not allowed to go there. You are not allowed to try and max a lift. You are not allowed to push a Metcon really hard, do a bitch work piece. So maffetone sessions and skill sessions, and setting your ego aside and taking a CrossFit class where you don't see if you can beat the whole class by 10 minutes in a workout. Like, go in, experience the class and the workout with the people, that sort of thing. The only thing that happens is every once in a while, a competitor will have a specialist in class. We've had that happen over next door a little bit. We get some people who can fucking run next door. So it's like, I'm trying to have fun in a class and it's 99% running, and someone's cooking, doing 110, 400s mid Metcon, and I see Caroline's a day after the games, full sprint down the road. I'm like, what the fuck?
A day later, it's like, that's the sorest I've ever been. Like, God damn it.
Survived the CrossFit games. We couldn't do class.
Yeah. Misfit Gym Portland class. Head to teammisfit.com for your affiliate programming.
Or the SugarWOD marketplace.
Zoe's reasonably fit dad. How should we adjust the programming for competing outside the normal season?
So there's a few different answers to this, but one of the things that we do, if you pay really close attention to Comp Block 2 and Comp Block 3, is that peaking schedule. So you would go in on your own, and we do this for athletes every year with, like Hunter and I will share a spreadsheet. We're getting ready for Wadapalooza. You take a 7-week period leading up to that. Week 8 would be your taper week going into competition, and you lay out week 1 and week 7 are the lowest volume. Weeks 2 and week 6 are a little bit higher. And as you get into the middle, those are the highest weeks. You can very easily, with the blog, do that for yourself. You can say 3 pieces, 4 pieces, 5 pieces, 4 pieces, 3 pieces, done. Good to go. You can go in and do that. And what we're looking for, again, is on the way up, we're realizing what you can get for intensity out of a piece. And then we're going to beat you up for 1 week on purpose, mental and physical. Like, we're going to go there. And then as you come back down, you get a new sense of fitness and skill and all of that, and you refine as you go. So I think the only other caveat would be, don't let it screw up the regular season if that's what you care about more. If this competition that we're hypothetically talking about is the most important to you, hell yeah. Go all in. Ask, email me and say, hey, can you send me Comp Block 2 in a PDF? Pretty good chance I'm going to do that. Pretty good chance we're also going to do that and sell them a la carte at some point, but we'll get there. So, yeah, I think that's my answer.
Good enough.
At Svileshina.
Nope,
I don't know if it's two things, one thing.
Keep trying.
Eric with a K. I thought your last name forever was Withak. I'm not good at this stuff. Okay, I just read it. I'm
Only been
sorry.
to like 3 camps, I think.
Just joined doing Hatchet with the goal of quarterfinals in 2023. Any advice?
Now you're doing it. Doing Hatchet. Good call.
That's for quarterfinals athletes.
That's for quarterfinals athletes. Do Hatchet. Scale it if you need to. Don't do more.
Stack volume, right?
Yeah, don't do more. You're in a spot right now where it's kind of cool. You can kind of, again, like we said, follow along with athletes and their peaking schedule. The Hatchet volume is less than MFT, but it proportionally increases. So you can get an idea of what that feels like. But once we kind of get back to the typical kind of off-season training, phase 1 through phase 4, follow Hatchet. That's about as simple as it gets. That's what it's for those kind of quarterfinals athletes who are, either just trying to get in. You kind of scratch that competition itch. Maybe you don't have quite the fitness to be at a semifinals level, but you have that competitive kind of vibe and energy. That's what the Hatchet program's for. So keep doing what you're doing.
Only other thing I'd add is just make sure you prioritize what you need most kind of on the front half of your day. Like we talked about with one of those earlier questions, that like you can look at the entire week if you're on the complete tier, see what is the most important things for your current fitness level that you need to address. Prioritize either those in the front half of your training session or front half of the week, or maybe the back half of the week, depending on what your schedule is like. And just make sure you check those boxes with intent, like we talked about beforehand. Go into it with an idea of what you're trying to do it, then reflect. But, prioritizing your weaknesses, sticking to the volume that's appropriate for you, and making sure that you reflect on things are like the 3 main things I would check off, trying to get yourself from where you are now to a quarterfinal.
I would say no matter where you're at, start out with the traditional 3 pieces a day with math sprinkled throughout your week. So we're looking at lift, metcon, skill. And until you have I think that movie was called Captain Phillips, till you have your Captain Phillips moment where you say, look at me, I'm the captain now to the programming. Don't add another piece. Do not add that extra piece. It's not just, can I handle this volume? Am I fucking smacking it around? Then I add that extra training piece, because that first time that you do you go there twice in a Metcon in a day, you start to get a feel for what it's like for all those crazies out there doing 3 of those in a math.
I'll also just add to the list of things that turned in from just a simple yes, keep doing what you're doing, to now here's a list of things, is that if you are, when I think of like, I am a Hatchet athlete and I am striving for quarterfinals, that I think of as an athlete who should also be really, really paying attention to learning how to move really well. A lot of times athletes who, especially if you're at a bad CrossFit affiliate, which exist, and you don't get the coaching as far as learning how to move correctly, move well with like the Olympic lifts, or don't get any coaching with high skill gymnastics, especially if you're an RX athlete, a lot of those folks just get ignored in affiliate class, which sucks. Pay attention to watch the YouTube videos, kind of film yourself a little bit, and ask like, am I even doing this correctly? Or ask a coach or someone to pay attention to how you're moving. Discord is a great place for that. But like, if you're just going to train and you're training poorly, like,
take you longer to get there.
There's a fucking masterclass personalized for you waiting at youtube.com/Misfit Athletics. Not toot my own horn. We've gone over every damn movement more than once, and we're going to continue to do so. If you go in and pick those out and spend the time watching them, you can really move the needle on how you move to sort of put together with what you choose.
At TB Smith 4, what's the deal with the Cooldown Crew?
It's cool.
Cut.
No, so one of the things that I think happened, and how this is kind of spurred off from that, was the Sunday miles thing. Drew was running every Sunday for a couple of miles, and then I started following along. We started doing Yeah, a couple of miles, like 2 or 2.25. But we started trying to make the idea of going out and doing a longer run on one of your, off days a thing. So we started with the hashtag Sunday Miles, and a lot of people kind of jumped on the bandwagon there and started to notice an appreciable increase in their fitness. Now, one of the things we talked about at our recent quarterfinals camp is that, most people understand they can't just walk in the gym, put 225 on the barbell and start snatching. They need to get themselves through a warm up so they can actually prepare themselves to do said movement. But the problem is a lot of CrossFit athletes finish the Metcon and then just exit stage left or immediately start thinking about the next thing that follows. And one of the things that we really wanted to hammer home when it comes time to understand how to get the most from a training piece and to make sure that you can do potentially multiple training pieces in one day is to understand the concept of you need to warm up, make a plan for your workout, execute workout, cool down and reflect. And that's how you're going to get the most from each training piece. So the idea behind the Cooldown Crew is something that just kind of happened at camp is we would do one of our breakout sessions. And then instead of people like leaving for lunch or leaving for the day, they would hop on a C2 bike or an assault bike or a rower, or just go for a walk for 5 to 10 minutes. And sometimes even longer than that, depending on how strenuous the Metcon was. And they're like, wow, like I can pour more intensity into my pieces and I'm getting more from them. And we're like, excellent. This is exactly what we're hoping to have happen here, is for people to appreciate the value in a cool down and what that allows you to do throughout your training day, training cycle, training phase, whatever you're getting into. It's going to make you a better athlete because you are taking the time that you need to make sure that you prepare yourself for recovery or your next training piece.
Yeah, I would say, just to give some specifics, if you are doing something that's not necessarily a Metcon conditioning piece, but you know that you're really, getting your central nervous system way up, lifting heavy, things of that nature, I would say that the cool down is still that 15-minute window, but we're looking more into the nasal breathing. I believe it's called The Art of the Breath, but you can look up some of the stuff that Brian McKenzie has done, and he has specific protocols if you do need that. But we're trying to bring ourselves back down. The majority of the time, we are looking for an athlete to spend 15 minutes on a machine or walking after a workout. If you want to go RX plus on this, you are technically supposed to create the other half of the bell curve. So you wouldn't just immediately go from riding a bike at a 140 to a 240 as your cool down. You would let yourself taper back down, and what I refer to as a reverse warm up. So with our warm ups, we're asking people to go from 0 closer to the Metcon speed. A cool down would be Metcon speed back down to 0.
And as far as like benefits to that go, you just hammer yourself with an intense Metcon. You've got blood pooled up in various places.
Blood pool.
Lower body intensive Metcon. Everybody knows that pump feeling. The small muscle contractions of biking really slowly on, a 0 damper, that muscle contraction continues to signal to your body, keeps the heart rate up in the sense that you are circulating blood, you're clearing waste using your lymphatic system to kind of get so that blood just your heart doesn't stop pumping and all that blood just pools up. And like Drew said, said that's an endurance community thing. I'd never heard of it before.
Finishing the curve. Yeah.
The mud blood thing.
Oh no, mud blood is from Harry Potter.
I thought you said it was an endurance thing.
No, dirty. They call it in the endurance community they call it dirty blood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yes. Okay, I knew the mud blood thing was a Harry Potter reference, but I was
fucking better.
Interesting.
Working here.
Hasn't watched Kill Bill yet.
You're just clearing that waste out of your system.
Yes. Yeah. The dirty blood thing is something that endurance coaches will say, like, if you leave it there, you're gonna be sore as fuck.
Yep.
All right. At John Yee's story. If I run an air runner, is the distance different than on the road?
Sure is.
Check.
If you have one of the older air runners, you are typically going to scale to 75 to 80% of the distance. If you are an athlete that either loves running or doesn't, you'll know whether you need 75 or 80% based on the Metcon. You'll know the answer. It's going to be the thing you don't want to do. So that could be shorter because you're going to run harder, whatever. If you have one of the new air runners, I have been told that they are faster, so I don't know what the conversion is. The good thing is most smartwatches can tell how you're running, like with your hand. So with the way that your hand is moving, so you can basically figure out, like when you're running, it'll say 1 mile. And you look down and you're like, okay, that pace, like that makes sense. It says 1 mile on my watch, 1 mile on there. So,
and if you don't wear wearables, just kind of ask yourself, how long would it take you out on the road, and try to create a similar time domain. That's a really easy way.
Jog an easy, if an easy mile for you is 8 minutes, go jog for 8 minutes on it. And if it says 1600, thumbs up, you got one of the new ones. And if it says 1200, you don't. Oh, who do I read this?
I don't want to answer. This doesn't count as my question.
I'll answer it. I'll read it and answer it. At Go So Hardy, is team programming coming back? Yes and no. So the answer for the short term is basically just that teamifying workouts for the sake of teamifying workouts. Anybody can do that. We can multiply the number by 4 or say that the work is doubled and you're in this pair and you're in that pair. The reason it's a yes, and a more exciting yes, is eventually team programming will be on the website year round. But basically the way that we do our programs is no matter what program you follow, there's one single sort of owner of that program. The person that writes the program and runs the program is the same person. That means that we need an additional separate person to be the team programming person. Hunter doesn't want to answer this because then he knows he has to read all of those Metcons and make sure they're good. We'll talk about that later, Hunter.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, but it's for another program. So
can't wait for Complock 2 team programming.
the answer is yes, but as with all other things, we are not going to throw a product out there and hope that people buy it if we don't think it's exactly what we want it to be. So the goal, the soonest that it would be back would be phase 1 in August.
There's team remote coaching though, correct?
Yes, there is team remote coaching, which I think for a team makes a whole lot more sense than team programming on a site, but All right, Hunter.
All right.
At our Portail SCF. What's the? I can't read Instagram.
I can't even read.
What's the?
Fools, look at me.
What's the main emphasis on this cycle?
The main emphasis is
Can't say cycle anymore.
Semifinal prep. It is not. So I'm assuming the question is like, what's our high CNS lift? What's our skill lift? What's our conditioning focus? It doesn't exist. It's not on the elemental chart. It hasn't landed.
It does exist though, because we talked about it for over an hour in a separate podcast.
It exists. Yes, I would encourage both of those. Listen to the Complock 2 podcast. Download the program guide. But we are preparing athletes for a semifinal. We are snatching and cleaning every week, but we are rotating kind of the lifting foci as well as the bitch work and conditioning pieces. So I think I'll just stop there and say go listen to the Complock 2 podcast and get your questions answered.
The order of operations that I recommended to people who reached out to me directly was read the guide, listen to the podcast, then fill out the personalization sheet. That is going to be the easiest way for you to do it. And if that sounds like a whole lot of work to do, we ask for a lot of people that are trying to be the best that they can be. Sorry.
What?
Or you're welcome.
At K Calvor, what is the main difference between training for quarterfinals versus, I think, semifinals? Was there another half to that, Ted?
Versus
Ted just pooped himself. Fuck. Semifinals. What is the main difference between training for quarterfinals versus semifinals?
I mean, the main difference is that you're going to notice that those athletes that are going on to that next stage for semifinals typically need to be prepared for a more strenuous competition per se than maybe the quarterfinals was for them. And, because there's the opportunity for more things to be sprinkled in with semifinals kind of being in person as opposed to kind of at your home gym, you're going to notice that the things that Hunter just talked about with the lifts kind of like rotating continuously is something we did in both Complock 1 and we're going to do in Complock 2, where Complock 1 being quarterfinals prep and Complock 2 being more semifinals prep. But I would say the biggest difference is there's more options to choose from a la carte that allow you to personalize this phase a touch more than the one prior. Not that there wasn't the ability to do that in Complock 1, but Complock 2 just, again, opens up the door for training a bit more when it comes time to be like, all right, maybe I wasn't the semifinalist this year, or maybe I didn't do as well in quarterfinals as I did, or I wanted to this past year. Here, there's some very obvious things I need to address, and what Comp Block 2 is going to allow you to do is essentially get a jump on the following season while also potentially playing along with someone who's going to be competing at a semifinal.
2 quick answers. One, it depends on the athlete. So you have a dozen eggs. What are you putting into what baskets? If you know you're not going to make it to semifinals, all 12 of those eggs go over. And obviously someone that's in the middle is sort of doing both. Also, quarterfinals is a known enemy. So we can write up our battle plan, how we're going to attack that. We get an equipment list. We know time domains. We know how many workouts they're going to be. It's not really very high volume. Whereas with semifinals, it is high volume, it's extremely high intensity, and we have absolutely no fucking clue outside of, sort of the obvious general themes of what those workouts are going to be. So I would say that would be my generic answer for that.
Come on, Decker, what the hell? Calves are right there, bro, right in that black and white
think he's
sock.
listening to this podcast?
It's huge, definitely. He's a huge podcast listener.
Big CrossFit
I think Ted will just send a
podcast guy.
soundbite to him.
Is he really?
Sherby crossing the Delaware is over my left shoulder, and there is indeed, I think one of the issues is if you are trying to find Sherb's calf, it's sort of like Waldo. So the calf is there. You just really have to lock in and find
huge
it.
Those things are. Come on.
Damn. Like some
There you
fucking
go, Brian.
linguine, some al dente linguine hanging out of those joggers.
At Sophie.Poliquin. I'm just saying that because the late, great Charles Poliquin, one of the greatest strength and conditioning minds of all time.
Agreed.
It's not the way it's spelled, but it's the way I read it.
Yep.
MFT versus Hatchet. What's the recommendation based on quarterfinals? We actually... we already answered this question.
Can't
so
do it again.
I'm not going to... I want to be able to read you a better one. Or at least one that we haven't answered yet.
All
We already answered that question. If you are qualifying for quarterfinals, not semifinals, you should be following Hatchet. If you are sniffing around semifinals or qualify for semifinals, you should be an MFT athlete.
What for
Personalized
the listener,
volume.
What is that? Top 200. So if 120 in North America go to semifinals, are you what's the bubble considered for that
The
group?
bubble is considered at some point you're looking at the weekend and you think you're going to qualify, or you're like, that fucking lift or whatever is the reason I didn't go. Your 1 through 3 had you there, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you are further down the leaderboard, but it's because you got to get stronger.
One thing.
Yeah, I'd say that's the case.
Boom.
At CF Steve Bart. That was a home run for me. What advice would you give to a bubble athlete, 200 to 500 in quarterfinals, to focus on over the next 3, 6, 5?
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty big range. The curve is exponential as you close in, like top 500. Like, not to discredit anybody in that range, but there's a massive difference between the 500th place athlete and the 200th place athlete, and I would say equally big gap between the 200th place athlete and the 100th place athlete on a given, let's say, North America, for sake of argument, a well within the semifinals caliber to, kind of not, a little bit outside of that. I think the first thing is that you need to, and I am writing an article in my head that will eventually appear on paper and therefore the website, on analyzing your...
You're going to write it with a pen?
Gonna write it. I might. Damn. And then I will scan it up onto the website.
God,
Fax it to the
I'm
website.
gonna fax it to Ted.
Fax it to Ted.
Ted, can you stamp this onto the website?
It is.
You got a fax machine. The first thing I would do is take a look at your open and quarterfinals placements. So did we do it on the Misfit podcast, or was it just on the Team Misfit one?
Where we kind of
on our last coaches podcast, we kind of broke down the 3 quarterfinals workouts as far as like the stimulus. And it's like, if you did well at this, but you did poorly on this one, this is what that says about your fitness. So I'm going to produce an article. I did that last year for quarterfinals. That would be actually a good place to start. It's like, I think it's called How to Interpret Your Quarterfinals Results.
Is that on Team Misfit or Misfit Athletics?
No, that's a Misfit Athletics piece. And basically you can tell what sort of training, what sort of test each of those quarterfinals tests were, and kind of be like, oh wow, it turns out that I did really well on the lift and event 6 where the heavy bar, or event 5 where the heavy barbell was in place, but it took me 20 minutes to do event 3, the cardio piece that was, low skill and just engine. That's a pretty, glaring, that's like beep, 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 beep. Like here's where you're missing the mark.
For the listeners, there were wild hand gestures that went with those noises.
There were wild listeners.
Wild listeners?
Wild listeners.
Feral listeners?
Wild listeners.
How do they listen? How do they pay their bill?
It echoes to the trees.
After that, it's making sure that you don't swing too far in one direction. So in Drew's example, it's like, oh, I was doing great on events 1, 2, and 3, and then I got buried by the total. Therefore, I am a weightlifter for the first 6 months of the season. I now have the total that I needed, but oh fuck, my cardio is in the garbage next to Ted's fax machine. So we want to make sure that we're not overcorrecting so far in one direction that we lose fitness in the other. Because if you're a 200 to 500 athlete, that tells me that you have the capacity. There's either, one fairly big hole or multiple like relatively small holes that add up. But I think it comes down to first kind of analyzing your open results, your quarterfinals results, kind of looking across the board like, yep, 200th place, 200th place, 1800th place, 100th place. It's like, where's the spike in the points that you took over those 2 weekends? And I do say the 2 weekends because the open, it's the top 10% that move on from the open. I would say that the tests in the open were different enough from the quarterfinals tests that if those 3 tests were in quarterfinals, that would be an interesting. I think that would just be interesting because the quarterfinals tests were.
More tests, more data, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
I was thinking about my answer to the point where I didn't hear anything you just said, so I'm going to guess that you covered it.
Got it. Oh, I thought you were just going to say you're going to repeat exactly what I said.
No.
At Smashily.
10.
Beautiful.
There. At
Great.
Smashily 10. Advice for teen athletes who are putting in work but not making the gains at a rate they'd like or expect, I'm assuming is the rest of that. I'm not.
Good question.
Not
Honestly,
they expect.
The place that I would start right off the bat is ask yourself, are you doing too much? And don't like to make a character judgment on all teenagers, but typically my experience is people think that they're so far away from their goals that they try to cram 5 years worth of training into like one season. And because they're trying to do too much at once, they're not able to make noticeable gains in the things that are really holding them back. So first place I'd look is, am I doing too much in a day? And is my recovery not able to keep up with the level of volume that I try to attack? Our teens program is something that I put a lot of time into, and I still hear teenagers to this day trying to do Hatchet or MFT, where that programming is just specifically not written for you. It's written for a different type of athlete. So, I would say
different type of human.
Yeah, technically, yeah, because they're not
from an age and development perspective.
So I would say, first thing is making sure that you're not doing too much. Second, make sure you are on the right program. And then third, maybe reach out to us on Discord. That team's channel is pretty sad and pretty lonely. And I think I've hi back to someone that never said hi in return. So just an empty hi out in the universe.
Still waiting to be returned. Sure, still waving.
To address any specific questions you might have, because without knowing a little bit more about you, it would be really hard to give you like, here's what you're, typically missing. And then last but not least, this kind of goes back to the book recommendation I had earlier on about Ego is the Enemy. It's a really interesting book. And one of the things that, your ego tells you is that you should be at this certain part at this part of your life. Like, I am this athlete, so I should be this far along. And a lot of times that can create a comparison that's not realistic, and that can rob you of the joy of like why you started doing training in the first place. So, you know, a lot of these things are self-reflection, but I think that's a great place to start when it comes to this question. And then once you've kind of dug really deep into that, then, you know, reach out for outside help.
I like putting lime juice on a lot of my food. And if I take the lime and I cut it in half and I just want to go eat, I've cooked all this time and it smells good and I'm hungry as fuck, and I squeeze the lime, I get like a tablespoon out of it. If I walk over to the drawer, take the juicer thing out, put it in and squeeze the whole thing, I get like twice as much out of there. And sometimes it's an actual decision that I make to squeeze the lime, the half of the lime, and throw it in the trash. Every training piece that you do is the lime, and you can decide what you're getting out of it by these little decisions that you make. And if you continuously make that quick decision so you can move on to the next thing, it's not going to work for you. So it might not just be too much volume. It could be adequate volume, not performed at the right intensity. And again, we don't always mean intensity is ramming yourself into the wall. It's intensity of focus. It's intensity of how hard you're going. There's a bunch of different aspects to that. But I would say, you know, how much juice are you getting out of that lime?
I'm glad. Nice how you wrapped that up. I was pretty worried there for a second.
I like food with lime juice.
I'm gonna. So this is what are you comparing what you expect to? And this is a conversation that I had with Brady. I'll just throw that out there because he's like, I was asking him, doing kind of our quarterfinals debrief, and I was like, so how do you think the weekend went? Kind of generic opening question. He's just like, well, I didn't do well as I wanted to. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, I thought I would do better. Okay, what do you do better at what? Like, well, I thought I would do better compared to other people. It's like, okay, we're getting there. The point is that like, what are you comparing your gains to? So, and maybe I'm just not reading the question. Maybe it's like, I'm not making any progress, which I don't think would be the case. It's like, I'm making
your answer
progress.
is approved. Keep going.
At what rate, you know, it is, it's what are you comparing yourself to? And what exactly is the rate of progress that you were expecting? Because if like, you have to have kind of a metric for that, right? It's like, well, if I expected to be a CrossFit Games athlete next year, you've got the wrong metric, right? That's too big of kind of a goal. If it's, yeah, I moved up a few hundred places from where I was last year, like that's progress. You can't discount that. So it's important to just, when you're asking yourself or saying to yourself, man, I wish I did better. It's like, well, better than what? Better than you were last year, better than, oh, I wish I was at this place on the leaderboard. But there are a lot of ways to measure progress. But if you don't have that metric kind of defined, it's like that, you know, you're just kind of using a negative framework to answer the question that you've assigned no parameters to.
I do wish that the year of CrossFit that sort of got canceled did take place in a more fluid way, because watching Justin Medeiros' progress from whatever it was, he started young, like middle school or something like that, to where he's ended up now. Like, I hope that someone does a doc or something like that so people can see how long and hard he worked. And I think a more human version of him would have showed up that year after winning that, sort of bursting onto the scene and winning that sanctional. I don't think he would have won. Well, he definitely wouldn't have won the CrossFit Games because he got to sort of chase that a year after anyways. But I think that those stories are super important. Every once in a while, Tia Claire Toomey will post some of her old lifting videos. You know, a lot of people don't remember that she was at the CrossFit Games before. You know, sort of that thing. So I would just say that these journeys that people are on, again, we're only paying attention to what is spit out of the factory afterwards and not all the shit that happens to create it. This one?
I think I'm reading it. When prioritizing pieces due to time, is it best to do so by individual weakness or individual goals or weakness?
I want
Yes.
Okay. So neither of you are allowed to answer this question, but I want you to reword it for me because I can see this meaning a few different things. What do you think this question means? If you were going to ask me this question, what would you say? Or would you just say the exact same thing?
I only have so much time in the day. How should I choose which pieces to do and which pieces to discard?
Okay. What do you think this means?
What he just said is pretty spot on there. I would say that I have limited time and I want to make sure that I'm doing what I need to be doing.
Okay. So what I see right here is someone struggling between the micro and the macro when they're making their decisions. So is it best to choose based on individual goals? So while your individual goal is to make it to quarterfinals, semifinals, the CrossFit Games, that is not unique. There's thousands and millions of other people who are trying to do the exact same thing. You've already sort of answered it by going into those individual weaknesses. So yes, you need to, no matter where you're at in relationship to your goal or how many people have that goal, how generic it is, you need to attack the things that you need to attack. So you need to prioritize your weaknesses. The only thing that I'll say with that we've said a million times and we're going to keep saying is you need to bias your programming, not overcorrect in your programming. When you go in and choose weaknesses, it's on a day-to-day basis. It truly is most of the year as simple as I'm choosing these 3 pieces out of these 5. These are the ones that I need to be doing. If you make those decisions on a consistent basis, the way that we've set up our programming, you will reach your individual goals. Like I guarantee that as long as, you're not in on-ramp right now and, Tia Clark Toomey's fuck next year. Like that might not be what I'm talking about.
But you also kind of argue that this is sort of the difference between the destination and the journey. Like the goal is kind of the destination at the end of where you want to be in the season, but the journey is going day to day and picking weaknesses to eliminate the gap of where you are now and where you want to be.
Yeah, the more unrealistic the goal is, the more you are not giving in to the natural order of how GPP is created and the combination of strength and stamina and gas tank and all these different things. It takes a while to move the needle on all those. So
I'm going to answer this quickly just from a different perspective, because to me, if you're asking this question that says, I'm prioritizing due to time, is it goals or weaknesses? Like the sport of fitness, like what we program for is based on who has the fewest weaknesses. So I'm just gonna say, like, if your goals are not in line with if your goals are not in line with like competing in CrossFit, if you're using the program for like reasons outside of being competitive in CrossFit, I would still say like there's value in addressing weak points in your fitness, because when you raise kind of the rising tide lifts all ships mentality, like when those weaknesses become less weak or kind of in line with everything else, your overall fitness, and even if you're focusing on a very specific area of your fitness, will also increase. So I guess the question is still kind of the answer is still kind of the same, but maybe from just a different perspective.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Misfit Podcast. If you like this episode, you like the Q&A format, you want to see it happen more often, less often, please let us know in Discord. It was great to sort of go into those Discord questions first. We know that there's a larger buy-in from the people participating in that side of our community in the Discord, and we are going to continue, whether it's gear releases or answering questions about programming or whatever. We're going to continue to prioritize the people in our Discord, which everyone can join, just because, again, there's that extra buy-in of helping us make sure that the community is as strong as it has ever been. Discord.gg/Misfit Athletics. Thank you to our show sponsors, properfuel.co. Use the code word Misfit to save 10% on all of your orders. That is new. We are going to be tracking how the Goon Squad stacks up in selling proper compared to our brand ambassadors. Also brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. You can head to sharpentheaxeco.com. Use the code word Keala, Keala. You save 10% on the bangin' Misfit Athletics semifinals collection. And we donate 10% to the Kiala Foundation. Last but not least, we are brought to you by ourselves, MisfitAthletics.com, TeamMisfit.com, SugarWOD Marketplace for your individual or affiliate programming needs. See you on Discord. See you next week.